the last 7 years, I joined as the secretary for the delivery unit, and my primary assignment was to set up that unit and help the presidency to be able to catalog, track, and report on the status of key projects using what we call a delivery methodology, and working with a number of specialist teams that were seconded to us in 2015, 2016 from the United Kingdom to help me get that set up and going, specifically through the Tony Blair Institute. So that was the initial brief. We got that up and running, got a good solid team, a mixture of young professionals, experienced administrators, communications experts, project managers, a very good slew of skill sets. Then later on, about a year and a half into the job, I got the job to deputize the head of public service, which was quite a privilege, and I carried on that role through until the end of the president's first term. Then in January 2018, the president reassigned me and gave me the role of Chief of Staff and Head of Delivery. I held that role in OP for another year, almost a year. And then in 2019, in Executive Order number 1, the president also reassigned the roles again, and we collocated the delivery team with the Interior Ministry, just taking lessons from what we had learned in the previous years, and that has been my day-to-day now until today. Sort of project management in an ideal scenario is difficult, but project management in a government public sector is a lot more complex, because there are a lot of factors that are not really in our control. For example, having sufficient funds at any one time to execute projects, because those are public finance. They're subject to the public finance management processes. So for example, you have to wait for Parliament to approve budgets. Those processes take a while, a lot of negotiations. Priorities evolve over time. So the kind of emphasis that maybe existed 12 months ago has changed. And some of these things are not necessarily in control of the teams that are monitoring the progress of those projects. You have factors of a public policy nature that have really impacted on our ability to execute programs. This is some of the sensitivities around project affected persons. Again, these are all lessons that we've learned along the way. In terms of factoring in these into when you have a bullish estimate as to when a project should be completed, I don't know what the appropriate word is, but you can be hit quite hard from the side by issues which you didn't expect. So the resettlement issues is a big issue for public infrastructure, and that can take any amount of time. The sourcing of funds and the process of budget making and approvals by legislative arm of government is also something that has a life of its own. So what goes in is not necessarily what comes out, and the politics of the day also shifts priorities quite drastically. So you do feel sometimes when you're looking at it purely because you're passionate about completing a project, it does take the sting. It does give quite a sting when you can't finish a project because maybe the politics around it has changed dramatically and it's no longer the number one priority. It is a priority, but maybe there's something more important that has come up that needs everybody's attention. Breaking ground for the SGR, and seeing it start and seeing it finish, and accompanying the president to chair steering committee meetings, and how he drove the performance personally from the front. He would schedule meetings to go and inspect the rail in the middle of the bush. Wherever the railway had reached, we would set up a camp there, and we'd meet the contractors and have a project meeting on that side, and people would report as is. Seeing that come to fruition end to end, for me, has been quite fulfilling. The next one that probably is still amazing is when Kenya hosted the TCAD with the government of Japan, and the Prime Minister of Japan was here. And one of the agreements we signed with the Japanese government was the commencement of the Mombasa Special Economic Zone at Dongokundu, and the construction of the bypasses from Mombasa to Dongokundu. Seeing those bypasses nearing completion physically with my own eyes, and seeing how what we were looking at on maps and MOUs on the ground physically being executed and coming to completion is extremely, for me, extremely rewarding. Watching Lamu birth from when the dredgers were in and there was nothing, and going there now and seeing 3 berths ready for equipping, that in itself is quite transformative. I can't. I mean, it's a list that can go on and on. 5 years ago, one of the campaign platforms in the coast against the president was that they said Mombasa, Pwani sio Kenya, because there was no investment in the coastal region. Now, from Lunga Lunga right through to Ras Kamboni, right at the border there, you have examples across the board of how the government has brought some form of equity in development in those parts of the country. If you look at the one-stop border post that has really improved trade down at the border, if you look at the roads, for example, from Voi to Taveta, what used to be almost a 6-7 hour journey from Mombasa, it's like 45 minutes from Voi to Taveta. If you look at those people who used to travel to Kilifi and having to go and wade through traffic in Mombasa, now they branch off at Mariakani and head to Bamba, and that journey is cut short. If you go to Kilifi County, there are places in Kilifi which were so backward. Around the Arabuke Sekoke forest, you had a place called Langobaya, which was so inaccessible. Now you have a road that goes all the way from Malindi through to Salagate, opening up the whole Galana area, Savo East, and just really bringing communities almost out of the Stone Age and into part of what we call the national development imperative. If you go to visit towns 10 years ago, when you see the power of devolution, towns like Wajir, which were just dust bowls, now they have tarmac streets right through. You go to Garissa, going from Garissa to Modagashe now, you have beautiful roads. These were places where people were so scared of leaving even Garissa without armed security. You don't even need to talk about the roads like from Isiolo going all the way up to Moyale going to Sololo, to Turbi, and all those places, making a whole different part of the country completely accessible. If you go across the Suguta Valley and come on to the other side of the country and you look at, I remember, and maybe this is my own personal reflection, the road from Kapenguria to Lodwar was so dangerous. I remember when I was at Safaricom, I lost a colleague who was shot dead in Kainuk, going to put up a base station. Now I see what the roads from Kapenguria right through to the border with South Sudan, Nakadok, Nadapal, Todonyang, going into Ethiopia, all the infrastructure that's happened on that side of the country where people believed that they were never going to be considered by the government. You go to Western Kenya and traditional complaints around exclusion. You look at the new roads from Kakamega to Kisumu. The city, actually the Kisumu city, the kind of traffic decongestion that's happening with the infrastructure there. You go to Port Kisumu, people still, you talk to the old men and women who used to work for the Kenya Ports Authorities, and they see the MV Uhuru sailing after being on stones and rusting for almost 2 decades, and now taking petroleum to Entebbe on a daily basis. I mean, these stories, I can go the whole day. You go to the people of Rusinga, who used to lose their families every rainy season because they couldn't cross from Bita across to Rusinga Island. Now they have one of the most beautiful and scenic pieces of infrastructure. So I'll tell you without fear of contradiction that when the president says that he has built more infrastructure for public good in the last two, well, in his 2 terms, in the last 9 and probably a half years, than all preceding heads of state, it's not a joke. It's actually true. In the last 9 years, the radical shift in technology is so drastic. If you look at what used to happen in 2011, 2012, where you had to bribe to get a search done for a piece of land, now you do it without interfacing with anybody, with the land's titling system. The land's information system. You go to what e-citizen has managed to do for the public, to remove that interface with potential rent seeking. So you don't need to know anyone to pay for these services. There are over 140 services available on e-citizen. People used to go to Sharia House panicking about how they'll get letters of documentation for companies and things like. Now you don't even need a lawyer. You can do the whole thing yourself, end to end. We are now probably hitting about 90 billion shillings in collections on e-citizen as we speak. These are transformations that are seismic for the country. I feel so much joy when I look at that and my small part in helping that come to reality with what has been invested in terms of improving the key enablers to the economy, that there is hope in sight, there is takeoff in sight. I maintain that growth, particularly with the government slowly receding from very heavy public expenditure on infrastructure and supplementing that now with more PPP infrastructure, I feel now the space for the private sector to grow is going to improve dramatically. And some of the key indicators around transparency and governance, due process, law and order, particularly some of the investments we've made in the security sector, have made our economy a much safer place to invest in. The resurgence of some of our sectors over the last year is something that we really want to inculcate, to nurture. Being an election year, of course, we have to be cautious not to create panic and not to hit sectors like tourism, which are very vulnerable to sort of political rhetoric and shock. But I believe that the president, the government are very focused in terms of just ensuring that the right environment prevails over the next few months. I think transparency in terms of procurement and the implementation of AGPO, the access to government procurement opportunities by young people and those with young people, women and people with disabilities. I think that has had a big impact on particularly the more entrepreneurial young people, because they have had access to government expenditure now going into probably 6, 7, going to almost 7 years in terms of their access to AGPO. Has it been perfectly implemented? Maybe it could do with improvement, but it's huge. I mean, almost 30% of government procurement opportunities have been made available to this demographic and has helped build the capacity. But in the converse, the challenges around payment and delays of pending bills has also had a bit of an impact on the same people. So there are some wins, but there are also some challenges that have come with it. If you look at the stadiums that have been completed now, the refurbishment of Moi International Kasarani Stadium, the refurbishment of Nyayo Stadium, the completion of stadiums in Wangoru, completion of stadiums in Narok, in Kisumu. You have ongoing works, major sports complex in Jamhuri Showground that will really be quite a showpiece for our sportsmen and women. And I think the penetration of digitization and the focus in terms of using technology as a key enabler for government services has also brought in a younger demographic into play. And I would probably say one of the most affirmative decisions the president has made for young people to sort of guarantee a future for them, I'd put them as two. One is the 100% transition program. We've lost children along the way after every exam cutoff. So from standard 8, we had a very low transition rate preceding the 100% transition rate directive. Now we have almost all children having an opportunity to finish secondary school. The kind of resources that have gone in this financial year alone, we will close the year with about probably close to 8 billion shillings going into expansion of school infrastructure at the lowest level of administration, so that we deal with the congestion in classes. We complement the work that our members of parliament have been doing with their CDF, and just basically guaranteeing every child has an opportunity, if they want, to finish secondary school. The next big thing he has done is to create a new viable pathway for young people who finish Form 4. They may not be A students, they may not be B students, but they have an aptitude and a skill. The creation of TVETs and the strengthening of TVETs in Kenya has provided thousands of youth with an opportunity to have an immediate bankable skill. So if you go into a TVET today, you have a bursary and you have a grant. And you come out with a skill, whether it's automotive skill, whether it's farm tech, whether it's business marketing skills that you come out with, at certificate level. Those certificates are recognized. People come out with some form of apprenticeship, and they're immediately absorbed. And I'll give you a simple example. Most of the people who've got certification in welding now are in such high demand. If you go to Kisumu, for example, the shipyard that is now currently functioning, they can't get enough young people to do welding. And these are all avenues that have been the focus of the president. They've been slow burning, because you have to build TVETs, you have to equip them, you have to put teachers, you have to do what. So they're only now just really coming into fruition. If you look alongside the TVETs and you see the expansion of the Kenya medical training colleges, again, those are all young people getting trained in a skill, a bankable skill. It's not degree level, but it's an immediate tool of empowerment. If you look at what Brexit has done for Kenya, because our young medical professionals are now in demand to go and fill the gap that was created by the Brexit situation. Again, if we were not ready, we would not have been able to take advantage of these situations. But it's because of our investment in medical training colleges and consistently running our young people through those is what has created this opportunity and allowed us to seize it. So I would say that the president's scorecard, when it comes to providing a sustainable opportunities for young people, is good. There are areas where he has probably felt he could do more around the creative arts and the creative space. And, in his tenure, the royalties going to artists have gone higher. They have improved. There has been a reform of the sector in terms of the collection of royalties. You saw how both the Cabinet Secretary for ICT, later the Cabinet Secretary for Sports, Arts and Culture, and the Attorney General have cleaned up the issue of collection agencies. These artists used to be scammed by a bunch of guys who would collect all this money from entertainment establishments, from radio stations, from mobile network operators, and none of this money would get to our artists. The story has changed. And the artists are wiser, and they've been given access to the government, and they've been given avenues to ventilate, and their issues have been dealt with. So I think every effort has been made to really try and address this demographic. As you're well aware, I'll be stepping down from my current assignment with the kind permission of His Excellency the President to take up, to vie. I've expressed an interest in vying for a gubernatorial seat in the county of Machakos. I want to share with the people of Machakos the knowledge, skills, and experience that I have garnered in my 22 years now of private and public sector experience. I'm very clear on what I would want to do for them. I'm very clear about the agenda I have for the county. But in terms of promises, I really want to listen and spend the next few months listening, sharing my vision with the residents of the county. The seat I am seeking is not a political seat. It just happens to be acquired in a political process. And the people of Machakos are wise enough to understand. They've had experience now. A lot of progress has been made, but they've also seen across the country how some counties have lagged behind. Take an example of several big counties across the country that on-source revenue is now less than what municipalities were collecting prior to devolution, because the focus has always been politics. I have said before, and I'll say it again, that I'm not looking to add to the constellation of existing political leaders. I am keen to take a job where the skill set that is needed is administration, is being able to coalesce different views, being able to work with elected leaders whose remit is actually politics and political representation to drive our agenda in the county assemblies, and to drive our agenda in the national assemblies, and to drive the agenda for the community in the Senate. And that's what I bring to the table. I've never been a polarizing figure. I've never sought to be unnecessarily controversial, because that's not my style. I like to work with people. I really enjoy working with people. And I've worked with people across the political divide, because that's what the public service has trained me to do. I've worked for one of the most astute public servants who taught me very early in the few days when I started doing that job not to carry my emotions and feelings to the office, and to serve all irrespective, and to keep the door open, and to make yourself available, and to make sure that you treat people with respect, and and maintain some level of simplicity in how you engage and commit to people. So I want to carry these lessons with me to the county. If it was purely because of stature, many people would stay in the public service, because the people who are leaving to go into these roles have very good jobs. They are very senior, they're very influential, they make earth-shattering decisions every day on a daily basis. They go home and the whole village stops when they see the flag, The reason I feel that a lot of senior public servants are moving is because there's been a shift in thinking. People actually can see that it is possible to work, and it's possible to work for people and give them what they have asked for. And most of these people have learned at the feet of this president. And they've seen what commitment and just diligent follow-up can do. Just to be able to sit people in a room and say, okay, can we solve this problem around this project? Because the two of you keep writing letters to each other. Can we stop writing letters and see how we address this problem? And people in a room sit and agree, and in the next week, people are on the ground and a project is completed. We've learned that, and we can see all of us come from somewhere. There's nobody who is an amorphous Kenyan. Everybody has a place that they come from. And when you go to those places, you can't ignore what you see. I, for one, feel like there's been huge progress in Machakos County. But now, having been in the national government and having worked and seen what I have seen, I know for a fact that there's a lot more that needs to be done. And why not volunteer myself to do this work? The job of a governor is not easy. I sit with them and I empathize with them, and they tell me, look, this thing looks glorious from outside, but in the inside it's rough. It's a negotiated democracy where you really have to sit with leaders at every level. You have to be humble. You have to be able to engage your MCA until he understands and approves what it is you want to do. So it doesn't matter whether you have this big title, His Excellency so and so. You are subject to oversight and governance by an MCA who is elected by 9,000 people, or even in some wards, 1,000 people. And really, that's democracy for you. There's only two possibilities in the election. Either win or you lose. Although in Kenya now we have a frequent, we say three, we have three. You can win, lose, and then you have a bizarre contested situation. But in my scenario, you know, you win or you lose. So if you win, you serve the people. If you lose, you thank them for allowing you to have presented your credentials. And unajipanga, and you figure out what you're going to do with your life.